Thank you. Well, I talked to you about the scenarios that Siobhan had given. So if I read through the beginning of this scenario, so you've got that. So the applicant A applied for asylum when they arrived in the UK over 5 years ago, but they're still waiting for a decision from the Home Office. Their parents have been granted refugee status, but applicant A applied for asylum in their own right as they were over the age of 18. They want to know how to proceed. So we touched on this on the slide before. In this instance, the student would not be eligible to proceed with an application for higher education funding because they don't have a status in their own right as yet. However, that doesn't mean that they can't apply for student finance if they've applied for a Home Office refugee status. They can still apply to student finance awaiting that. It doesn't mean we will pay it. It just means that we know that you've put in an application to the Home Office, which is pending. Now, once the Home Office get back to us or tell you that you've got that status, then you've got it from day one. And if you start university, then you'll be entitled to that funding. However, if you haven't got it before the start of the course and that starts to become a worry, we have the ability to be able to contact the Home Office to find out what their status is and how that would work. So what I've basically got here is an example. So if you start your course on the 1st of September and you were granted refugee or leave to remain status, say on the 10th, in the 10th month, so October on the 3rd, then they'd be eligible for the full tuition fee and maintenance loan only from term 2. What I mean by that is we've in this instance, because you've got 3 terms in this country, you would start in September, that's term 1. Then you've got term 2, which would be starting in January, and you've got term 3 that would be starting in just after Easter in this country. So what we do is we pay over 3 terms. So we assess you for your funding and then we give you 3 lots of money equally broken into 3 amounts to give you, and the tuition fee is paid directly to the university. So in this instance, the student would not get term 1 of maintenance, that's your living costs, but we'll cover your whole tuition fee, but term 1 we won't have given you any funding. I just dealt with somebody recently who had a sanctuary scholarship. So basically they'd got their funding for the sanctuary scholarship for this term because you're still in the first term, but they've just coming into getting the refugee status now. So we would pay their tuition fee for this whole year, but they won't get any funding from the student loans company till term 2, but the sanctuary scholarship would then come to a stop because you don't fit into the asylum seeker route anymore. Next slide, please. So applicant B, they've got limited leave to remain based on a right to private and family life. Now they're over the age of 18 and lived in the UK for half their lives. However, they aren't sure if they have the right documents to prove ordinary residency for the 3 years. They want to know how to proceed. So private life, private and family life fall into long residency, which is what I talked a little bit about earlier. You don't meet the other criteria, so could we look at another residency for you? Now, if you've lived here for a long time, basically we would need to start looking at you having 3 years address history prior to the course. So for 3 years, we need to have some proof of that. So where we'd be looking at is, did you have let's say you've been living in a tenancy, so you'd have a tenancy agreement. You might have had to have been registered with the local authority. This is proof that you've lived there for 3 years. So what we're trying to show is to get you to prove to us that you have been here for the last 3 years to meet this residency criteria for a start. So it's showing that you've lived here for the 3 years. You might have been with the doctor, you've registered, so they'll have the registration date. You might have been going to school here, so the letter from your school or your college to say what dates you were here, and that would prove your 3 years residency. However, that's great for the 3 years, but for the long residency, if you're over the age of 18, you need to provide half your life. So if you're age 20, we need to provide you to provide the student loans company, Student Finance England, with 10 years worth of information to show where you were in this country. So you've actually met that criteria. So prior to going to university, you need to try and get as much information as possible from anything. You could have even maybe applied for asylum. So that would show the date that you were here. You might have gone to school. Those would show the dates, the doctor's letters that I've mentioned before. Things that if you got free school meals, all of these sort of things, that's all evidence. It's not one piece of evidence that we'll be looking at, and we would then look at that, and then we would give you full funding based on the fact of long residency. Next slide, please. So the next scenario is applicant C. Now that they've got a refugee status, but they're nearing the end of their 5 years leave to remain. They've made an in-time application for indefinite leave to remain and have sent their identity documents to the Home Office. They have been waiting for a response for a long time and are concerned that they will not be able to apply for student loan in the meantime. They want to know how to proceed. Well, this student can definitely apply for a student loan whilst they're waiting, a bit like the scenario in the first one. They can apply for that. And as long as they've held a valid immigration status prior to submitting this application, then we can take their previous status, as long as it didn't expire. We've got like a 14-day grace period. So let's say I've got